right. Well, we might as well go ahead and get started. Kevin is going to read us the starting off verse for today. We are going to be diving into chapter 2 of The Heart of a Warrior. It was written by Michael Thompson, and we've been enjoying this study for the past couple of weeks, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kevin now.
All right, Luke 8:15. But that on the good ground are they, which in an honest and good heart, having heart the word, keep it and bring forth fruit with patience.
What are the two dangers of creating a mission for yourself?
I can start it off if you want me to.
Absolutely.
Well, this one seemed to be pulling straight from the book, so I pulled straight from the book. The first danger is that we'll make our mission too manageable, and we'll make it small enough so that we can accomplish it on our own. Like, we'll make it within what we believe are our own human bounds. And the second danger is the complete opposite of that, where we'll make it too big and something way too grand that's way out of our perceived control, and yet we've got lofty dreams and think we can handle what's beyond our means.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I took things to a more personal level with this question, and I was trying to think about incidents in my life where I was on my own mission versus where God was trying to lead me. What I mean by that is when I was high school and up, that college career age, I had one thing that was on my mind, and that was finding a relationship. I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to spend my life with somebody, and that was my mission. And I found out very quickly that I was trying to accomplish this mission without God's help. And I was going to do it myself, and I didn't care what anybody said to me. I didn't care about what my friends were telling me, my family. This was what I was going to do. I was desperately just going after this goal because it was driven by fear, and that fear of being alone. And I found myself in a position where not only was I hurting myself emotionally, there's a lot of baggage that I ended up having to carry into some of my other relationships because I was choosing to follow my own path, my own mission. And I didn't learn that lesson the easy way. I learned it the hard way. It wasn't until I was at my breaking point where I finally gave in to God and said, all right, I've done everything my way and it's not working. Lord, I'm just going to follow you. And it wasn't until I made that commitment to follow him. That's when it was my first full year back at camp and working on staff. And that was where I really felt like I was truly dedicated to his mission for me. My mission was to be there for the summer. It was to serve those kids. It was to serve the staff. It was to really glorify and honor him with my actions. And that's when God put my wife in my life. And that's when I noticed a big difference when I started following his mission, when I started trusting him. That's when I'm like, oh, I get it now. Like, it's so much easier when I just follow you and trust in you and your mission. And so sometimes I feel like we get so caught up in that word mission that we see this big, huge master plan on the wall, and we have to go and conquer something awesome. And like you guys are saying, making too big of a goal. And sometimes we forget about the little tiny missions in our lives that God puts in our life. And if we are choosing not to follow them, sometimes we can really see some pretty traumatic consequences to that. I mean, you look in the Bible, and I think the very clear illustration here would be Jonah. And God gave him a mission, and he did not want that mission. And he went in the opposite direction. And it wasn't until God literally had to just pull him in with the fish. And even then, his heart wasn't truly there, but he finally followed God's plan. And so there's a lot that we can learn from that. We can kind of dive into that study in and of itself. But yeah, sometimes looking at an answer like this, and we can give that book answer, but I was just really trying to think of more of a personal example of what happened in my life and how God used that. And I really, I find joy in serving God on His mission. Right now, Christy and I are on this journey here at camp, and I don't know how long we'll be here, but I know that we're here for. It feels like we're at home. It feels like we're doing what He has called us to do, and I really love that. Is it easy? No. There's ebbs and flows, and right now, we're really feeling it as far as just some of the hardships that come along with serving God. But there's a joy that really it's hard to explain. It's hard to put in words. It's hard to share that feeling with others. But when you truly experience that joy of serving, it's really it's addicting, and you want more. And so anyway, that was what was on my mind with that.
As I was reading through this chapter, I didn't really know what to expect because I've got a habit of not reading titles as I'm going through books. So I just kind of go into a bunch of chapters, which is blind, not knowing what I'll be expecting. It's more fun that way to me. So I didn't read any of the chapters or the titles or subtitles for this chapter. So when we were in the section that we're in, the mission finds you, and then we got down to that one line. Well, as I was reading it all, and he was describing how you go to a men's conference and the guy's making a real general message that kind of will like hit for every man there, but it's also broad enough so that you can interpret it a certain way. And how he's like, everyone's settling down and taking furious notes and all that. It rung a bell in me because that's what it was a lot like down at college. And it's not a bad thing per se, but when you've got over 1,000 people in an audience listening to a message, the tendency is to make it so that it can hit as many people as you can, but that ends up making it more broad and more not as hard hitting as it could be. And so when he was talking about how you got to go out and find your mission and whatnot, I was finding myself nodding along with his inner monologue of that's not going to work. It's not going to end well. And then he had that quick line after all of that where he says, try this, missions find you. It was one of those, huh, kind of moments. I wasn't sure what part of this book would hit me like that, but apparently it was this part where it's like something that seems so simple, so plain as day, and yet when it's finally spelled out for you, it's like, that makes a lot of sense. Why haven't I thought of it that way before? So I just wanted to make mention that part, it particularly interestingly, because a lot of times I think we can all agree that we've had experiences where missions find us. Maybe not the typical thinking of like missionary work and whatnot, but missions find you as in it could be serving in your church, or for Tom, you serving there at camp. I'm sure it wasn't your life's goal since you were a kid to become camp director. I mean, maybe it was, I don't know, a secret goal that you had. But I doubt if you asked 6-year-old you Hey, you think you ever want to be the director of camp, handle all the nitty gritty background details of finances and whatnot? 6-year-old you would say no, I'm sure. But now here you are, and as you just said, you love it. And that mission found you. And when I read that, it was fascinating, would be a good word, fascinating to me. It's kind of like opening up my eyes. But anyways, the question again, what is the primary mission for every man? And that base goal should be reclaiming our hearts. The world is constantly trying to pull us away from what we need to be doing, what we need to be thinking on, dwelling on, pondering. And it's a constant battle for our heart where the world is trying to put in all the bad stuff, corrupt it. And we, as Christians, should be trying to push all that out and block it away from that in order to keep it pure and clean for God. And reclaiming our hearts, that journey and that process is kind of just, you strip bare every part of yourself, every facet, every little personality quirk, every want, every desire, and you just lay it all out in front of God. Let Him pick and choose and fine tweak and throw out and bring in and reconstruct you into the man that He wants to be. Most of the time it'll hurt, it'll be tough to get through, it'll be a slog, but the mission to reclaim our hearts is a never-ending battle that we should all be willing and excited to fight.
I kind of had the same thought when I was reading chapter 2, because I mean, I can say from personal experience, I've been to a lot of different churches or even like meetings or whatever, like conventions, and you'll sit there and someone will be talking and they'll say something and like your mind, you're like, yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. And then like you leave and then you have this kind of like, I don't want to call it feeling of like emptiness, but you're like, that was really great, like for the first 5 minutes, and then you're driving home, and like as you're driving home, that like motivation or like that fire that was lit inside of you just kind of like slowly dwindles away, or it might last for like a day or two, but then you're just like, I have really no idea what that guy said to me or what that person said to me. Like, what does that even mean? So I like that you pointed that out, because I kind of laughed and was like, huh, the mission finds you, because I mean, like you said, everyone can sit there and say that like Tom didn't plan on, maybe he did plan on being camp director, but I definitely didn't plan on being in Washington for, 2 times out of my life. But I'm here for a reason. There's a specific reason why I'm here, and there's nothing. I didn't even plan on going back to Connecticut, to be honest with you, and I ended up back there. And so, it's amazing how like we have these kind of like individual thoughts or individual plans, and God's like, no, you're going over there. And then before you realize it, you're like, oh wow, like things have changed so differently. But but yeah, back to the question. I like what you said about reclaiming our hearts. I kind of took like a I don't say a broader standpoint, but from my standpoint as a man, also being a husband, it's, I guess, kind of a little more fine-tuned, other than reclaiming your heart, like as the man or the husband of the house. A very important thing for me that's constantly like a daily reminder is like loving your wife as Christ loved the church, because as we all know, we're all human, we all make mistakes, and sometimes people get really angry, or they get really sad, or really in a way that you sometimes can't get through to them. And that's a lot more difficult doing than just saying, oh yeah, I'll love you forever. Because there's some days anyone's like that. Not everyone's going to be lovable every day of their life. But it's making that choice, sticking to that commitment, and holding the promise that you made between God and your spouse to say that, yes, I will submit and sacrifice and continue to love you no matter what happens, no matter your good days or your bad days or whatever the case may be, which leads into like being the leader of the house. because I don't have kids, but I know that it reflects primarily off of my own upbringing. And Tom is a great example. I see it when I was at camp. Whenever I would be around Tom and Christy, I see it. How loving your wife and how it reflects to the kids, and how submitting to God. All of it is a line. Submission isn't a bad thing. It's actually a very vulnerable and open thing that changes your life in ways you can't even imagine. So, yeah, that's what I'll say about that. It's a very hard process because it's not easy, because being the leader of the house, or like submitting in that way, means that you have to essentially die to yourself every day, because it's no longer about you. It's about the family. It's about God. It's about the wife. It's about everything else, and ensuring that you're doing what God has called you to do. And so the journey and the process is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult, but He calls us to it for a reason.
We really want to motivate people, and we want everyone to experience the things that we're experiencing. And so we can sometimes throw out a lot of these general statements in sermons and in conferences, and we're really trying to hype things up. But it really falls down to the individual and where God is leading that individual. And you really want to spark and interests, and you really want to encourage people to just be like, hey, if you follow God, great things can happen. And I think the best way to go about that is almost just sharing your own mission with others and how God has impacted you. I mean, all throughout Scripture, we just listed all those men, and every single one of them had a unique mission, and they're all special. And we could say, oh, well, this one's smaller than this one, and this one had more of an impact than that guy. And we can get nitpicky, and we'd be like, I want to do something significant for God. And sometimes it's the little things. David Brainerd, he was a missionary to the Indians, and he really did not see any anything from his mission. And it wasn't until after he died is when people were really starting to come to Christ. And so he spent his entire young life, he died in his 30s. But the point being is that he was probably questioning, like, why am I even doing this? What's the point? Well, God was still using him, even though he didn't see or was able to reap any of those blessings while he was here on earth. But at the same time, he had a special mission. We all do, and everyone's going to be different, and that's okay. It's just a matter, I think the biggest thing that we need to take home with us is the fact that we can serve God no matter where he puts us in life. And if we're willing to just say, Lord, use me. I think it's just having that right attitude about serving God, and being open to what he calls you to do, and not closing the door on God and being like, nope, I'll do anything but that. Lord, I will do anything but clean the toilets at church. I will do anything but stand in front of people and preach. I will do anything but, and we have our, you get my point, is we're putting up boundaries, but I think if we just open ourselves up to be like, Lord, I trust you. And it takes a lot to do that from a personal standpoint. I mean, when we came here to Camp Northfield, it was something that we were not planning on doing. It was not in the cards. I wasn't 3 years old playing with my Camp Northfield toys and telling my mother that I was going to be a camp director when I grow up. That's not what happened. All right, I just want to make that clear. You guys seemed to be very confused about that earlier. But no, but the point being is that my wife and I were set. We both had great jobs. We were making good money. We were supporting our family, and we had a beautiful home. We were renting at the time. We were trying to buy a home because we were settling in. We were good with being the youth leaders at our church. We were good with the jobs we were at. And that's, we were just ready to just work the next 25 to 30 years and retire and call it good. But God had other plans. And the way that we approached it was, Lord, if this isn't your will, close this door. And that's kind of how my wife and I really approach things moving forward with a lot of big decisions with our family, is we just ask God, if it's not your will, just close the door. But we're willing. We always want to be willing going into a situation, no matter how big and small it is, whether it's having another child, whether it's, a church to go to, all those types of things. We always want to bring it before the Lord, and we just want to push doors and trust him for it.
The message I heard on Sunday, actually, at the church over here, and it was on Philippians 2:12 and 13. I'll just read them real quick. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And one thing that the pastor said about at the end of his message that really stuck with me was he was talking about, he gave an example, and he said he's taking the seniors at the school on the senior trip, and he looked up a few different options for them, a cheap option if they wanted to go here, and then like a kind of middle of the road option, and then like a really expensive option. And then they would have to do different amounts of fundraising and work based on each one and whatnot. And he said that finding because I was thinking about the mission here is, part of the mission is finding God's will for your life. And that's like, everyone's main mission, or it should be. But he said that finding God's will for your life isn't like that. It's not like, well, I want to do what God wants me to do, but let me see what these other options are first, and then I'll pick based on what seems like I want to do. He said that if you're looking at it that way, you're never going to find God's will for your life. You have to surrender yourself, and he said you need to bow your knee to him first and say, hey, whatever you want me to do, and then he'll start to show you his will. And that's just something that kind of stuck with me. It's not really like an option, or it's not really a, well, I'll see if it's something that I want to do. It's, you have to be surrendered to him, and then he'll start revealing it slowly. So
It's really a miserable kind of life to live when you're just so focused on these goals you set for yourself. I am going to do this. And if this doesn't work, I have this backup plan. But if that backup plan doesn't work, then I have this backup plan. And you kind of go through life going and trying to plan, and all of a sudden, all that stuff just goes out the window, and it doesn't even make sense statistically. And then all of a sudden, you're in this position where, what do I do with myself? Like, this was my desire. I was going to be, I was going to be an engineer, and everything just fell through. I don't know what happened. Okay. I don't know why. I should have passed this test, but I didn't. And now all of a sudden you're in crisis mode, and you start to feel a lot of pressure from the outside. Family questioning, well, what are you going to do now? Or you have a lot of friends that had expectations for you. There's a whole bunch of things that can really fall into that, fall on top of you when you start to try to plan our own lives. And I'm not saying that planning is wrong, but it's just having that mindset of being willing to just trust God for our future. Because sometimes we can get so caught up in creating our own future that once things just start not lining up, you could really just kind of implode. And I was starting to get there with the whole relationship aspect of my life. When I wasn't reaching my mission, that's when I really just started it consumed me. That's all I could think about. Like, this relationship didn't work out. I don't know why it's not working out. Now I have to go and find another one. And it was just this constant. And if I'm not in a relationship, then I'm not happy. And when I'm not happy, I'm depressed. And when I'm depressed, I'm miserable. And then when I'm miserable, I'm making everybody else miserable. And it's this tumble. And sometimes we just need that reminder, or for me, a kick in the pants, to just remember that, hey, who's in control? God's in control. He's going to give you a mission, and that mission is going to find you. If we want to stick to this theme here, we just have to trust him for it.
I do think it needs to be said that it's not 100% the way we were just all talking about. It's not like we can just sit here at our desks or wherever we're sitting on the couch, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for something to fall in our laps. I don't. I think it was when Dom was talking about this. The parable of the sower and the seeds popped in my head. When you hear those messages that kind of hit you real hard for the first 5 minutes, and then you just kind of whatever. That's like when the seeds fall on the rocky places. They sprout up real fast, then they die. But then the good seeds, where you hear those messages that actually hit you hard, or you do that, your mission finds you, that's when you're planted in the good ground. Except that you need to be available to be planted first. You can't just expect everything to fall into your lap in order for you to, oh, this is what I get to do now. You need to be willing and able to put yourself in a place where you can be used. So there is a small aspect of looking to find your mission. It's a give and a take. You need to be willing to take that first step out in order for God to start throwing things your way. As if you stay bunkered down in the safety of home, or just some small quiet corner of your life where you're not going out and trying new things, going new places. Yeah, eventually something might find you, but will that be the greatest thing that God has planned for your life? Maybe not, because he's waiting for us to take that step of faith out and go and start working for him of our own volition.
I know we're used to talking amongst believers, and we have our group here, and this is great. But sometimes we forget that very first step. And we can't do any of these things without being a child of God. And, there's a lot of people out there that aren't. And so we often take that for granted when it comes to the mission, because there is a great commission that we're supposed to be following as men, as believers, and going and sharing the gospel. And that's all part of it. It's not one of those things. It's a command. It's one of the very few commands that's given to us in Scripture. And we often treat it like it's a suggestion. And, I say it a lot from the pulpit about just, getting up and going and sharing the gospel. But yet I find it one of the most hardest things for me to do, because it's so outside my comfort zone. I'm getting more comfortable with talking with people and strangers. I really don't tend to go out of my way to start conversations. That's the true New Englander in me. But at the same time, I know that it's the right thing to do, is to show Christ's love and to share the good news with others. And we can go into a whole nother segment about sharing God's word, but that was something that really stuck into my head when you started talking about first steps and kind of bringing it in as far as the mission in our lives and where God has placed us and all that. So
There was a message I heard once about when Jesus went to Mary and Martha's house, and Martha was so busy, um, getting everything ready and serving. Now, was she doing something wrong necessarily? No, because she was, serving and trying to get the house ready, get the food ready for dinner, whatever. But she was so busy on the serving aspect and just focused on serving that she kind of just forgot all about the whole purpose and that Jesus was right there. And she forgot about her savior because she was so busy serving. And that's just something that's kind of always stuck with me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in combination with everyone kind of talking about, like Jack was talking about taking the step, um, and everything. I think it's easy to say. It just all boils down to faith. Like the whole one of the core foundations of it is like you talked about having that plan. Like, okay, it's okay to have a plan, but understand that the plan that you might have created since you were 4 years old is not the plan that you're going to be currently living when you're 24 years old, or even 36 or 65. It reminds me of um, I'll see on social media, there's some Christian like influencers, I guess you could say, that post content, and one of them made a video specifically about like purpose, and he was talking about how he was praying to God one time, and he was like, God, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Um, whatever you need me to do, I'll drop it. It doesn't matter what it is. Like I'll do it except for becoming a pastor. And then God spoke to him and was like, I need you to be a pastor. And he was like, he kind of stood there dumbfounded because he was like, but I don't really want to do that. And then he ended up doing it, and he saw that, um, obviously it helped change him. Um, his heart was like, more vulnerable towards God, but the way that God used him to influence other people was also miraculous. And it just comes to show, like you were talking about, we set boundaries for ourselves because I would say that's just a human thing to do. Like, we all want to set a limit of like, it's okay, I'll go this far. Like, I'll ride a roller coaster that's 100 feet off the ground, but I won't go skydiving, right? And it's like you always try to get close enough to where you can experience it, but not so much to the point where. And so, it, like I said, it all just comes down to faith. Like, understand that you might want to ride the roller coaster, but God says jump out of the plane, and He's the parachute. You were talking about being content, um, and I feel like there's also like another side of that coin, or another ridge to the coin, where like you can be content with, you could be discontent with where you are, where God has currently put you, and is having you serve, because you feel like you should be doing something different. Um, but at the same time, I think there's also a side um, where the faith aspect comes in, like what Jack was talking about, where you're so content
yeah,
being where you are, you don't want to move because
yeah,
you're
that's
scared of what the like what the other ridge is going to be. Like yeah, you're being faithful and doing everything that God's telling you to do, but then He's like, oh, I need you to move here, and you're like, I don't really want to do that, and He's kind of pushing you to do it. And you're just kind of like, well, I don't want to do that. And you're so content being there because it fits everything that you want to do that you're unwilling to move. And that's, I mean, I don't even know if that's to say that's the worst thing, but I think it's just another thing that we can get caught up into, um, because our heart is so, like with Mary, like stuck on serving. You're serving, you're serving, you're serving, you're serving, but you're not realizing that like you need to move. That moving you somewhere else, it's not all for you. It's not for your benefit. It's for His glory.
I mean, it's kind of like mountains and valleys. Once you're satisfied and comfortable in your position, you're at the top of a mountain, but you're able to look down into that valley and see what's before you somewhat, and you know just how far down that drop can be before you hit the next mountain. And yeah, for some people, I'm sure you can get scared of what happens if you start making that journey down. And that's what can hold a lot of people back. They're just clinging to that mountaintop and not willing to go down that valley to climb up further.
Jack with the analogies.
I love my analogies, man. Leave me alone. They make me
Yeah,
happy.
Dude, they're good. No, I'm just saying they're good. They're good.
Jack's got all the analogies. I got all the stories.
Yeah. Everyone needs a shtick.
When he's giving us these new missions in our lives, it isn't constantly like, well, let me throw him this curveball or let me throw him this curveball. I feel like we're kind of doing it to ourselves, is when we choose to just kind of resist, we're creating that curveball. And it's something to kind of keep in mind with this topic is I think it's okay to be comfortable when we're serving God. But like you said, don't be complacent when it comes to serving God. Don't feel like you've reached the top. Always be willing to have that learning mindset when you're in kind of any aspect of life. When we feel like we've made it, when we did everything that the Bible said, and we've mastered it, that should be a warning sign that there's probably going to be some corrections heading your way. But I don't think God is just out to like get us or to make our lives miserable with these missions. I feel like we just, like I said before, we just do it to ourselves. And if we just trust him, we could really find joy in serving him.
I definitely don't think God's out to make us miserable. I think he's quite the opposite. He's got quite the sense of humor, because we can go and make all these life plans, and for those planners that you were talking about before, they'd be like, I'll do this and this and this and this. You'll be like, ha, that's a good joke. How about we do the opposite of that? Great plan.
Yeah, it brings up a point. I was talking to someone actually while I was in Connecticut. I don't know if I was talking to you about it, Tom, or maybe it was my stepdad, but it was a junior sailor at work, and we were in a patrol car one day, we were doing some stuff, and he specifically asked me like about my faith, and I, kind of, I didn't shyly tell him, but I was just like, yeah. I was taken back by the fact that he asked, because usually in the military it's not a thing. Either someone does or doesn't. You have chaplains that kind of go around and do all the faith services for everybody, but for the most part, it's never really a discussed topic. But yeah, he asked me, and one of the things he brought up, kind of like how we were talking about, like how we don't think God sits there and like having things happen to us. He was kind of using that as an example of why he feels like he shouldn't believe. It was a very interesting, and I feel like it was a very good constructive conversation between the both of us. For me, he was actually listening, like trying to, obviously refuting and bringing back arguments to try and like counter me, but he was actually listening, taking in and understanding, like trying to understand like the thought behind being a Christian, like what is it. And I think it's very interesting that a lot of people have that idea that like like, oh, it's all God's fault, he's having this happen, like this is happening to me because of him. And it's like trying to explain that to someone who's full of pride and all these different other things, it's very hard to get through. But when someone's actually trying to be open with you and say like, hey, like why does this happen, or what, like whatever the case may be, and you're able to kind of explain like the steps and the reasons why, or whatever the case may be, and that's not God's fault. He's not sitting up there going, yep, today this baby's gonna die, that kid's gonna get cancer, that person's gonna get run over by a car. Like it's not, I don't want to say cut and dry like that, but it's not cut and dry. Like, but that could be a completely different conversation. But yeah, that just sparked a thought in my head.
I'm all about sparking thoughts. It's my goal in life.
It is.
No.
Such
God
disbelief.
has a different plan for me. All right. Well, I feel like we have maxed out our time here tonight with the question and answers. I feel like we've talked this enough, and we're gonna move on to the counterpunch story of the week. Let me go ahead and dive into our counterpunch story of the week. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to read this one. Again, I've been finding most of these from the Tom Jackson archives, from my old sermons. And so these are just some wonderful stories and accounts in history that have just really touched my heart. And I hope that they'll do the same for you. So here we go. In northern Thailand, a family birthday celebration for one of the players on the school soccer team was going to start after the team returned from their cave exploration. This was something the coach did with the soccer team annually. They enjoyed the beautiful caves and the mystery of what lies beneath the mountain. They walked into the cave like they had done many times before, some even taking off their shoes because it made it easier to get around. As they hiked further into the cave system, something became noticeably wrong. Water began to rise, and this was something that caught the coach and his team off guard. They never knew that they never had known that the monsoon season would have started a month earlier than normal. The 12 soccer players and their coach became trapped deep within the network of tunnels. When the families did not see their boys that night, they knew something was wrong. The governor called in help worldwide to save these young boys and their coach. The best recovery divers would fly in from all over. One day turned into two, two into three, and three into four. The boys and their coach struggled to keep calm in the cold, black space that was left for them. The waters that flooded the cave were like a rip current, and the path leading to the boys was treacherous. It consisted of 6 chambers, and all the paths leading to these chambers were submerged in these rough waters. The coach helped the boys remain calm in the constant darkness. The soccer team stayed alive by eating what little snacks they brought in and drank water that dripped from the cave walls. After 10 days, divers penetrated deep inside the cave, and while setting the safety lines, by the grace of God, they found the boys alive. This would not be an easy recovery for the soccer team. The men that were diving in were experts in their field, and most were Thailand Navy SEALs. The rescue team sat frustrated around the table, trying to figure out how to save all the boys. It was estimated to have an 80% death rate. The only chance that they had of saving the boys was to fly in an anesthesiologist who knew how to dive. They could sedate the soccer players one by one to avoid the risk and struggle and death. This was never attempted before, but it was decided in that tent that they would stop at nothing to make sure that each boy got home to their families. An international coalition of divers, engineers, and logistics pumped water out of the cave, established 6 stages to replenish vital oxygen for divers. Sadly, during the setup of the recovery of one of the Thailand Navy SEAL divers lost his life when he got caught in one of the heavy currents in the rip through the cave, knocking off his mask. The recovery of the boys took over 4 days. Before they sent each boy out one by one. They had them write a letter to their families just in case something happened. The divers shepherded the team and the coaches out of the cave. Despite the odds of an 80% death rate, all the boys and their coach were in good health and good spirits. The team of divers were not going to stop until they rescued each and every soul from that cave. And then I put in my notes here, as a church, are we going to let fear dictate who lives and who dies? There are so many people that might never come and know Christ as their Savior because we, believers, are too scared to share good news with what God has done for us on the cross. What scares me today are those that are comfortable of being a Sunday morning pew warmer, and then I go on and talk about being a lukewarm Christian. But the counterpunch story of the week is kind of a simple one here. Is they could have very easily just gave up with trying to recover those boys and said it's too dangerous. We're not going to risk a single life. We're not going to go in, and they could have just called it, but they didn't. I would say you'd almost have to have faith in order to do what they did. They knew the odds. They had every statistic out there. I watched a lot of documentaries on the extraction of the soccer team out of the caves, and there was not a lot of hope for these kids. But by God's grace, they all survived. And so sometimes we have to do things that might not seem like it's within the norm. Sometimes it might seem like it's too crazy of a thought, too crazy of a mission. But you know what? God's in control, despite all the odds that we could think of in our minds, and we could just trust him for it. Anyway, there's your counterpunch story of the week.
It's a good one.
Amen, brother.
All right.
That was good.
Anybody have any last remarks before we cut the cord on this baby?
What?
Yeah,
That was.
let's leave the analogies to me. Yeah.
We cut
sorry.
that one out, Jack. Could we cut that last one out?
Sorry, that's on Tom. Tom, you better.
Don't worry. 90% of the stuff's going to get cut. Don't worry.
Good.
That's going to be the first one.
So it's going to be 10 minutes long. Got it.
You got it.